Hi everybody, I'm doing my project on the bystander effect, and to start off with just a simple definition, it's the greater number of bystanders who observe an emergency, the less likely any one of them is to help, and this can be found in our textbook. So to start off with some examples, the most famous example of this phenomena was Katie Genovese, and she was a 28-year-old woman who lived in New York City. Around 3 in the morning, she had just gotten off from work and she was walking home when a man approached her and stabbed her twice. He fled the scene but then returned and proceeded to rape her and beat her to death. Witnesses said that the attack lasted about 45 minutes, but no one alerted the cops. It was reported that at least 38 people had heard her desperate cries for help, but help did not come. And there are different variations of the story. Some said that there weren't 38 witnesses, some said that there were, but the point was that people heard her and nobody helped. So finally, at around 3:50 in the morning, an elderly woman called for help, but by the time they arrived, it was too late, and Kitty had already passed, cradled in the arms of the woman who had found her. A more recent example, but perhaps even more heartbreaking, of the bystander effect is the story of Wang Yu. And she was a 2-year-old girl who lived with her parents in China, and they owned a stand at a local market, and she would sometimes go to work with them. And so one day she was wandering around the market on a narrow road where she was ran over by a van, and the driver did not stop or get out to check to see if the toddler was okay, and they just continued to drive along. During the next 7 minutes, 18 people walked by the child who was laying in the middle of the road, and I can say that in confidence because there was a security camera that caught the entire event, and none of those people helped her. So finally, after laying for 7 minutes in the road, a second van ran over the little girl. And just like the car before, the driver did not stop and get out to check to see if she was alive or not. Finally, a trash collector who was working in the market removed her from the street and went to go get help. And Wang was rushed to the hospital, but she died a week later. My last example is Jana Murray, and she worked in a Lululemon store in Bethesda, Maryland. And she was working the closing shift with her coworker Brittany Norwood. And while closing the shop, Brittany tried to shoplift a pair of yoga pants, and Jana tried to stop her from doing so. And what started out as a minor altercation escalated because Brittany choked Jana and then proceeded to inflict 331 wounds onto her battered body. Next door to the store where Jana was being murdered, there were 2 Apple Store employees who can be seen on camera just standing right next to the adjoining wall. And they could hear telling Jana, someone, "Don't do this, God help me, please help me." But the Apple employees did not do a single thing, and they decided to return to work. And Jana was found the next morning face down in a pool of her blood, and she was dead. And so after the Katie Genovese escapade, these 2 social psychologists, John Darley and Bib Lonte, were shocked by how none of those people living in the apartment complex helped her. So they came up with this experiment called the bystander apathy experiment. And so they ran the test to see how many students would respond to another's cries for help. And the results from the experiment shocked the social psychologists because their experiment showed them that if there were more people witnessing the event, then there was a greater chance that an individual would not respond or provide help. And so they summarized that this was because of 2 main concepts, and the first being pluralistic ignorance, which basically means if nobody else is reacting, then the other bystanders are going to think, oh, nothing's wrong, therefore I don't have to do anything. And the other concept that they came up with was the diffusion of responsibility, which said that if a bystander's sense of responsibility, it decreased as the more witnesses there were because they felt like, oh, there's more people here, somebody else will respond, I don't have to. And all of this can be found in our textbook, and it is also supported in Kendra Cherry's article, The Bystander Effect, where she discusses what the bystander effect is, why people succumb to it, and ways to prevent it from happening. And so if you apply the research to those examples I talked about, we now have an explanation as for why those bystanders did not call for help. So in the case of Katie Genovese, all the bystanders chalked it up to regular urban noise and that she wasn't actually in help. with Wang Yu, there were multiple people, 18 witnesses to be exact, who saw her laying in the street, and so each of them thought, oh, somebody else will help her, I don't have to help her. And with Jana Murray, the Apple employee later told the cops that they didn't do anything because they thought it was just drama. So going forward, most social psychologists believe that the reason that there is such a large bystander effect is because many people are not aware that there even is such a thing called the bystander effect. So it's really important that you spread awareness about what the bystander effect is, and that way, like, the more people know, the more will be aware. And so they'll know, don't be a bystander, take action, and be what they like to call an active bystander. And these are my references. And that was my presentation. Thanks.